All right. Looks like a good amount of people have trickled in. Good morning again, everyone. My name is Bonnie Beniwal. I'm the Carbon Drawdown Director at the Climate Center, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Today, we are talking nature-based solutions, what they are, what they look like in real life, and why it's so important to scale them up now as we prepare for more climate extremes in the years to come. We have an awesome lineup of panelists that you'll hear from shortly. Next slide, please. Or actually, I'm not sure if the slides are being shared right now. Mark, can you confirm? Oh, there we go. All right. Well, before we delve into the topic at hand, I want to take a moment real quick to thank our webinar sponsors. Next slide, please. So I want to thank Peninsula Clean Energy, MCE, River City Bank, and Sunrun. Next slide. I'd also like to thank our promotional partners for helping us spread the word about our webinars. Thank you all so much for your support that enables us to make these webinars happen. Next slide. So some quick background on the Climate Center for those of you joining us for the first time today. We were founded 25 years ago and have been working as a think tank do tank to turn bold ideas into action for a climate-safe future for all. We work in collaboration with other NGOs, environmental justice organizations, labor unions, and businesses to deliver the equitable climate solutions that science demands right here in California. Next slide. Our work is focused on four key pillars: phasing out polluting fuels, drawing down past climate pollution to achieve negative emissions, building resilient and affordable energy, and funding climate solutions. Next slide, please. All right, now to the topic at hand. What are nature-based solutions exactly? These are a broad suite of actions that protect, restore, or sustainably manage lands to address climate change while also supporting biodiversity and human well-being. You can think of them as the conservation, restoration, and sustainable land management of our natural and working lands. This means things like forest conservation easements, wetland restoration projects, and regenerative agricultural practices. This means things like urban tree planting, prescribed burns, and compost application. Essentially, solutions that pull carbon from the atmosphere, protect communities from climate disasters, and protect the ecosystems that we depend on for clean air and water. But oftentimes, hearing about nature-based solutions can feel sort of distant, even abstract. So today's webinar speakers will show you nature-based solutions in the real world. A river coming back to life in Stanislaus County, a farm in the Capay Valley that weathers drought and wildfire, trees planted in Richmond providing shade to working families whose electricity bills keep rising. These are not theoretical, they are real and tangible, something that is already working and we need much more of, and as quickly as possible to provide the resilience and negative emissions in the near term. Next slide, please. Now, I want to underscore a few key points about nature-based solutions. First, they provide a unique triple climate whammy that the vast majority of other climate solutions simply do not. They simultaneously reduce the emissions, say from wildfires, remove existing atmospheric carbon, say by storing it in soils, and three, provide resilience to climate threats, say restoring wetlands to protect coastal communities from sea level rise. But nature-based solutions are so cool that they give us way more than those climate-specific benefits. Water. Healthy riparian corridors and wetlands filter water, recharge groundwater, and reduce flood damage. Clean air and public health. A single desert conservation study in the Mojave found $23.7 million saved in healthcare costs across Imperial, San Bernardino, Riverside, and Inyo counties from reduced particulate matter exposure alone. That is just one example. Food security and farm viability. Healthy soils programs increase water retention, reduce the cost of inputs, and build drought resilience. Critical as California lost 10% of its farms between 2017 and 2022 alone. Biodiversity and conservation. Nature-based solutions investments directly advance our goal to conserve 30% of our lands and coastal waters by 2030 and protect the critical habitats that make the state one of the world's biodiversity hotspots. Equity. Many NBS investments, urban tree canopy, wetland restoration in the Delta, air quality improvements near farms, deliver the largest benefits in disadvantaged communities that have been historically underserved. Economic opportunity. Restoration work, prescribed fire programs, and sustainable agriculture create rural jobs that cannot be outsourced. Okay, so incredible. Lots of benefits to gain. But another important part of the equation is what we have to lose. What is the cost of inaction? I know, next slide, please. Okay, so I know that this slide is doom and gloom, but unfortunately, that is the reality we're facing more and more frequently. I'm going to throw out a few numbers to ground today's conversation. Again, this is a glimpse into what is already happening in California. We just had the costliest wildfire in US history here in California, the LA fires last year, totaling to over $250 billion in economic losses. California farms supply nearly half of the nation's fruits, nuts, and vegetables. When droughts or flooding hit, grocery prices rise everywhere. Ec- Economists project that these losses could exceed $10 billion a year by 2030 without intervention. Insurance prices are spiking as natural disasters are increasingly um, becoming more frequent and severe. Insurers are leaving California and homeowners are being left without coverage or drastically higher premiums. The median cost of home insurance has increased by nearly 20% in just 2 years. We need resilience and we need it now. Next slide, please. Fortunately, nature-based solutions have gained more traction in recent years. Here's a list of some of the major milestones. In 2020, Governor Newsom released an executive order that called for 30% of conservation of our state's lands and coastal waters by 2030, a movement referred to as 30 by 30. That was followed by the passage of SB 27 by Senator Skinner the following year, which, among other things, fortified for the first time our land sector in the state's blueprint for achieving climate goals, aka the Air Resources Board's scoping plan. A huge next step, and one that one of our panelists will speak to much more later in the presentation, is the passage of AB 1757 in 2022, a bill by Assemblymember Cristina Garcia and Speaker Robert Rivas. This bill importantly directed state agencies to set the first of their kind NBS, nature-based solutions, targets. These targets are measurable and span 81 actions across every major landscape in California. According to a recent report from the Natural Resources Agency, we are on track to meet 59% of our 2030 targets, meaning there is urgent work to do to close the gap in the next few years. Last year, the legislature recognized the importance of nature-based solutions in the Cap and Invest reauthorization bill by adding it as one of the, or as the only new priority for greenhouse gas reduction fund investments. The next step here is to actually dedicate funding to align with the legislature's priority. So this year, we're championing AB 2184, a bill authored by Assemblymember Lori Wilson that will do just that. This bill is making its way through the legislature right now, and my colleague Pamela is going to drop a link in the chat so you can ask your legislator to support this bill if you feel so compelled after hearing about why these investments are so important today during today's webinar. Next slide, please. Okay, enough for me. Let's hear from our speakers. First, we have Judith Redmond. As Judith turns on her camera, let me tell you a little bit about her. Judith is the co-founder of Full Belly Farm, a 400-acre farm in Northern California growing fruits, nuts, vegetables, flowers, herbs, and pasteurized chicken. She serves on several community organizations as a volunteer, including the California Climate and Agriculture Network and the California Department of Food and Agriculture's Scientific Advisory Panel on Resilient and Sustainable Agriculture. Welcome, Judith. Take it away. Oh, now I'm on mute. Judith, you're on mute.
Okay, thank you. But thank you, Bonnie. And as Bonnie mentioned, I am from Full Belly Farm, and we were established in 1985 in Northwest Yolo County. We're certified organic ever since then. So we've been certified organic for a long time. We grow 100 different crops year round, very diversified on about 400 acres. And the annual crops include things like summer tomatoes, melons, peppers, and eggplants, or fall and winter broccoli, greens, carrots, potatoes, winter squash. We also have perennial crops like these plums here, also peaches, pomegranates, almonds, walnuts. And we grow lots of flowers. This is a busy flower week for us with Mother's Day. That's our packing shed. Plus, not pasteurized chickens, but pasture-raised chickens. Here are some of them, and we sell lots of those at our farmers markets. And we're a busy place. There's lots of extracurricular things going on all the time, like tours, classes, farm dinners, and even festivals. So you're going to get a lightning tour of some nature-based practices at our farm, hedgerows, compost, cover crops, and even a few other things along our lightning way. The first thing I'm going to talk about are the hedgerows. We started planting them in 1990. There are quite a few of them on the farm. I had a hand in planning and planting all of them, except for our most recent one. On this photo, you see the table grapes on the right and the native trees, shrubs, and grasses on the left, which are providing undisturbed areas on our farm, which is important because we're an organic farm. And so those beneficial insects and pollinators that find habitat and food in these hedgerows are really, really important to us. They're also a buffer against dust. They sequester carbon. And as our crew numbers are, as we've needed more labor and we have more crew, we've realized that they're also helpful to our crew because they carve out little pockets in these hedgerows as shade. And in the shade, they sit there and bunch onions and broccoli at different times. So there's multiple benefits. Compost. So, yeah, we're very proud users of compost. We've been using it for 40 years on our fields. Every field gets it every year. It adds carbon to the soil, feeding our soil microbes, which then feed the plants, which then feed us, keeping everyone healthy along the way. Compost reduces the need for added fertilizers. Here's a photo of our compost pile. The white stuff is gypsum. And here's a photo of us spreading our compost. So we combine the use of compost with the use of cover crops. We have a really strong belief in the importance of cover crops. We think of our soil health as medicine for it's as a mechanism for decreasing our water use, making us more resilient during droughts, and of course, enhancing plant health. So we're growing in our cover crops legumes, which fixed nitrogen plus deep-rooted grasses. And they can grow pretty tall. Here's a photo. And they have a lot of benefits. One of the things that we've learned over the years is that in a mature soil that's organically managed, the nutrient cycles operate really differently than if they're just being given water soluble nutrients. The nutrient cycles with a cover crop and with organic materials are enhanced because the soil microbes are enabling the crop roots to find that organic material that contains carbon and nitrogen that we've banked in the soil and that's really broken down as needed, which is really different from the non-water soluble nitrogen of conventional agriculture fertilizers, which leach that nitrogen into the groundwater when it's not being used directly by the plants. These high organic material soils also help to increase water infiltration. We don't observe any soil erosion. We don't see our irrigation drainage water running off of our fields. There's they say 40% increased water holding capacity when you're using compost and cover crops on your field. And if you're getting a lot of droughts or have historic lack of snowpack like we do this year, thinking about water holding capacity in your soils is really important. And here's a beautiful photo of the soil tilth. That's a legume. It's vetch right there that you're seeing. And if you what those that vetch is doing is those root nodules there show you that something really good is happening. It's taking nitrogen out of the air and making it available to plants through the roots in the soil. So that's your sign that something's happening. That's good. So the next thing I want to talk about are our long-term investment in solar power and energy use efficiency. And this is a very recent installation on our farm of a variable frequency drive pump. We do a lot of irrigation. We need a lot of pumps. This is a pump that's in the creek, and a variable frequency drive pump basically provides the amount of energy that you need in your fields for the irrigation that you're doing at a given time. This particular installation reduces energy consumption by up to 80%. It reduces carbon dioxide emissions from that particular pump by 90 to 100 tons per year. It goes direct from the solar to the pump, so there's no batteries in there. It can operate during frequent power outages. We're in a small, narrow valley where there's only one road going up and down. And it would operate in a wildfire, which is really beneficial for us. We could need that water to help with fighting the fires, and we get a lot of wildfires where I live in a rural area. Doesn't put off diesel fumes, that's been eliminated, and it doesn't risk diesel spills into the creek, and it saves 6,700 gallons of diesel fuel per year. We find that it uses less labor, and of course, it's quieter. This is a wildlife area, and diesel pumps are very noisy. Since 2015, our investments in some of these kinds of efficiency and solar projects has been assisted by Sustainable Technologies, and the wonderful Ernesto Montenegro made this chart available to me. It shows you that 8 projects since 2015 have saved us a lot of kilowatt hours, a lot of money, and in fact, with an investment of $108,000 over these years since 2015, we've saved over $752,000. So pretty amazing. I wanted to sort of highlight the climate smart agriculture programs of the California Department of Food and Agriculture. I've been on their board since 2016. I think the program started in 2014. And since that time, there's been $727 million invested into these programs, which basically provide incentives to farmers to adopt some of these practices that I've been talking about. The programs are hugely oversubscribed. Many more people want to adopt these practices than we can provide money for. The vast majority of the participants intend to continue using these programs even after their 3-year grants. And that's the results of a survey that was done recently looking at talking to all of those participants. The participants feel that their farm has become more resilient, which I think is a real attribute. We talk about cost savings, but it's also about just resilience, building resilience of your farm during droughts and extreme weather. And even there's people looking over the farm fence and saying, what is that guy doing now? And they're saying, well, that looks really good. Maybe I'll try it. And it turns out that half of the participants feel that their project inspired others to adopt these kinds of practices. Then there at that last bullet, you see a bunch of acronyms. Those are some of the programs that we call Climate Smart Agriculture, AMP, Alternative Manure Management Program, then the State Water Efficiency, Energy Efficiency, Energy Enhancement Program, and the HSP, the Healthy Soils Program. So if you look at all of California's climate smart programs, these programs rank really high in terms of the greenhouse gases reduced per state dollar spent. So yeah, I mean, farmers are seeing rising costs of production, rising energy costs, high labor costs in California, lots of increases in input costs, extreme weather, challenging new regulations like SGMA, Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. So these kinds of practices that I'm describing on our farm take a long time before you really see any of the results and benefits, actually. So that's why this legislation that the Climate Center is telling you about is really important because I teach a lot of classes to people who are transitioning from conventional to organic agriculture, and they want to adopt these kinds of practices. And but the funding goes up and down and all over the place. And this kind of a legislation would make it available over the long term without jumping around. So thank you so much for your time, and looking forward to the questions and answers.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Judith. As Judith mentioned, we will have an audience Q&A at the end of the webinar, so please put your questions in the Q&A feature and we will ask as many as we possibly can. So next up, we have Matt Holmes. As Matt comes on the camera, just want to tell you a little bit about Matt. He is the co-coordinator and of the California Environmental Justice Coalition and senior advisor at Valley Improvement Projects. Matt has spent his career centering the communities most impacted by climate and the least resourced to respond. Matt has served on the AB 1757 Expert Advisory Committee as well as CARB's Environmental Justice Advisory Committee. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Bonnie. Thanks, Climate Center, for giving us a chance to present on these topics that really matter to our communities. As you said, I have the honor of serving as the Secretary for California Environmental Justice Coalition. We're about 100 statewide communities, statewide grassroots community-based organizations with a handful of technical allies. We live in second-class California. We focus on anti-racist strategies and radical inclusion. Same can be said for, same can be said for Valley Improvement Projects, which focuses on the northern San Joaquin Valley, the most disinvested region in California. And what does anti-racism look like, and what does radical inclusion look like in the fourth largest economy of the world that we're always so happy to hear about? This is what California's poverty and pollution looks like. This is the Office of Environmental Health Hazards Assessment CalEnviroScreen, which frankly could be a little deeper red in a few places if you know the neighborhood. We're not experiencing equal outcomes in California, and which is why we're absolutely committed to supporting nature-based solutions. For 4 billion years, terrestrial life has evolved as it should. Folks ran the state of California since time immemorial, with the highest concentration of indigenous people in North America, and it only stopped serving everybody about 150 years ago when extractive agriculture and extractive energy practices turned it into a cash cow for the fourth largest economy. It's no mystery how this happened. Policies of white supremacy that backed up acts of white violence divided the state unequally. So on the left there, you see a representation of how much of California was given to a whites-only class of Californians who have senior water rights, which they use to exploit agriculture and to asymmetrically govern the state. And then we should all be familiar by now with the practice of redlining, which was a skewed race-based insurance and loan practice that decided who has wealth and who has a voice in California. I became oriented to the legacy of white supremacy and climate resilience in my work in Richmond, California, where I was the city's urban forester. I had the privilege of planting thousands of trees through the state's cap and trade program. It funded the urban and community forestry program. And I learned, first and foremost, that trees do sequester carbon, but they do a lot more to knock down particulate matter. They do a lot more to cool and shade communities. They do a lot more for community health and mental health. And they do even more for individual resilience of people involved in climate resilience strategies. A paycheck is what lets you drive away from wildfire smoke. I'm intimately aware with the co-benefits of investing in nature-based solutions. And if I had had my way, I would be doing nothing but planting trees in second-class California, trying to provide folks with the resilience they need to get through this narrow passage. Unfortunately, I've been soaked up in the world of policy. The same programs that funded me came out of AB 32, but they were funded as carbon sequestration strategies. AB 32 was a landmark law that required the state to set carbon goals. But unfortunately, those carbon goals were set by, frankly, desk engineers, folks that believe in pipes and spent the first 2 decades focusing on false solutions like carbon capture, utilization, and storage, instead of the 4 billion years of terrestrial biology that this planet knows how to furnish to maintain its climate. Fortunately, it did create the Environmental Justice Advisory Committee, where for the past 5 years I've served on its 2022 scoping plan, which was the fourth of it. And now we're working on the fifth scoping plan, and this is the state's economy-wide scoping plan. For the first 20 years, we focused on framework and we focused on math and things that seemed easy to calculate, but we never really prioritized nature-based solutions. We were finally able to make a space for natural and working lands. It became clear through that process that the California Air Resources Board, the state's lead on carbon policy, lacked the core competency to evaluate and support nature-based solutions in natural and working lands. So fortunately, Christina Garcia helped pass AB 1757, as you heard Bonnie say earlier. This created an expert advisory committee. This is an expert advisory committee of a lot of great scientists who proved that investing in these strategies did more to sequester carbon and, more importantly, provided more co-benefits that matter for people. I don't know how many of you stay up at night worrying if we're going to meet our carbon budget, but most of us stay up at night worrying about wildfires, drought, and suffering. And so, to give you an idea of what 1757 focused on, these are the eight working areas: forests, shrubland and chaparral, grasslands, wetlands, croplands, vegetated lands, seagrasses and seaweeds, and my favorite, developed lands. That's what those look like across the state of California. Geography matters when it comes to place-based solutions, just like geography mattered based on communities of color and where they were allowed to live. And so I just give you that to give you an idea of what investments in those strategies looks like. These were good scientists. I was really proud of them when they did the agricultural recommendations. The first thing they came up with was, we got to do something about farm ownership. Protracted farm owners who aren't tied to the land, who live in Bel Air, and they take more water than Los Angeles County. They don't really experience the negative impacts of mismanaging their land. So they're able to abuse workers, they're able to overuse pesticides, and that the primary recommendation in the agricultural framework was to diversify farm ownership, to increase farm ownership among women and people of color. So I appreciated the last presentation. They also focused on ecosystem functions. There's nothing like an employee that you don't have to pay who shows up for work every day, and that's what a tree and a wetland and a peat bog is. And then, of course, there are co-benefits because we're dealing with multiple catastrophes. Besides, we have extreme heat, we have extreme flooding, we have nitrate contamination. And so those co-benefits are worth focusing on. Not only can we sequester carbon, we can reduce those risks. We have like $1 billion disaster every day in the United States related to climate. We're losing species at an extinction rate across the planet. So not only can we meet this carbon myopic commitment of the state of California, we can also save all the little life things that make life on this planet worth living. I think I've already stated this. Investing in natural and working lands helps everybody, but it helps those who are most vulnerable. And if we all went through COVID, we should have learned from that inequality is dangerous for everybody, not just the folks on the other side of the tracks. This is just a quick comment about water instability. For those of you that don't know, the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta is the largest estuary on the west coast of North and South America. Climate-related risks that are directly tied to nitrogen contamination from over-fertilization and dairy profligate has put a real risk to 25% of the state's drinking water, which we're at risk of losing any minute. So the overall recommendations were nature works. It works better than engineered solutions, but we needed to start it a long time ago. Wish we had the 2 decades back. The sooner we invest in a tree, the better. Best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Second best time is now. And so with all that, I'd like to spend more time on extreme heat, which is going to hit the Central Valley in my hometown of Stockton, California, really hard. But unfortunately, just like we did for the last 20 years, fighting off false solutions, we're going to be fighting off new solutions. So this is a map showing you when the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Act was passed, or the Global Warming Solutions Act was passed in 2006. And here we are 20 years in, finally with requirements to invest in nature-based solutions that matter to people and places. And so those false solutions got in the way, and we're at risk of running into new false solutions. So I'll run through these really quickly. We don't have time to discuss them, but I want to name them because anything that gets in the way of doing a good thing is a bad thing. And so here's some silly strategies that are parading as nature-based solutions. This is a map from the Home Alliance. These are projects all around the world pretending that corn to ethanol is going to save us, and capturing the carbon makes it okay to do as much as you want. We have crazy ideas like filling the atmosphere with reflective material, making the ocean foamier and whiter so that it reflects starlight, electrifying the Puget Sound so that more CO2 can fall out of it onto the floor of the sound, ocean fertilization, dumping our garbage in the ocean in the hopes that something might grow on it, seaweed farming and seaweed sinking, surface albedo modification, making places brighter so they reflect more light, because that's a whole lot easier than, I don't know, maybe using less fossil fuels. Burying biochar and bio oil, burying biomass itself, geological storage. I'll say a quick note on this. This might help with subsidence in California. I'm a little bit open on this one. Genetically engineered trees and plants, what could go wrong? Industrial afforestation and monoculture plantations, enhanced weathering of rocks, because yeah, we should make rocks dusty and instead of look at how much fossil fuels we use. These result in displacement, land grabs. We lose more nature, which was our friend in the first place. It really concentrates control and enables extractive practices. And above all, they all distract from the fact that we need to stop setting stuff on fire and throwing it into the sky. So if you want to learn more about Home Alliance, I can put this up later. But that's the end of my presentation. Let's get back to basics. Thanks, Bonnie.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. So much to talk about in such little time. Um, I'm sure we can get into more of that during the Q&A portion. So as a reminder, please do direct your questions into the Q&A. Our speakers will try to answer the the straightforward ones in the Q&A feature itself, and we can discuss the others during the Q&A portion. So next up, I would like to welcome Lilia to the virtual stage. Lilia Lomeli Hill is the co-founder of the Grayson United Community Foundation in Stanislaus County. Lilia has witnessed firsthand what it means for a small farming community to be surrounded by a degraded river and fight for it to come back to life. Lilia, thanks for being here and for sharing your experience. The stage is
Thank
yours.
you. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to speak regarding, nature-based climate solutions. I want to offer an example of what a nature-based climate solution looks like in my hometown it's a 4x5 little farming community called Grayson, in the San Joaquin Valley. There are many possible nature-based climate solutions. The one I want to talk about is the floodplain forest restoration, and that is planting trees and other native vegetations along the rivers in their floodplains. Of course, floodplains are the lands alongside rivers where the river can overflow safely when flows are high. As you might imagine, these are very rich growing environments where trees and plants can grow quickly and abundantly, as you can see in the photos. That would be the next slide. These are taken in Dos Rios State Park, where the Tuolumne and San Joaquin River flow together just a few miles from my home. Dos Rios was restored from agriculture to forest in just a few years, as you can see. As these trees and plants grow, they restore carbon from the air in their own bodies and in the soil. It stays there for decades. California has used forest projects to store carbon for many years already, and the carbon storage rates have been scientifically documented in many types of forests, including floodplain forests. And there are so many co-benefits. These are not only a great climate solution, but they create many other important benefits as well. Mainly the habitat. Many fish and wildlife species, including threatened and endangered ones, need a floodplain habitats to survive. The restored floodplains in Stanislaus County near Grayson has helped one species, the Aleutian crackling goose, come off the endangered species list. Another thing is flood management, giving rivers room to slow down, spread out, and sink in, reduces pressures on levees and that protect people and property, and that I will talk about later on in this presentation. Groundwater recharge. The water that flows onto floodplains can recharge groundwater aquifers, and again, I will also expand on that later. Water conservation. Native trees and plants do not need irrigation after a few years, so that water can be used elsewhere or returned to the river. Recreation. Forests near rivers make great parks and open spaces, as we have seen at Dos Rios, which is now a state park in our own backyard. Next, my hometown of Grayson is shown on the map. Next slide, please. And of course, I went over that already. My apologies. Yes. It's shown on the map, and it's about 20 miles west of Modesto in Stanislaus County, right along the San Joaquin River, just upstream from Dos Rios State Park. Now, I've lived here in Grayson for over, well, all my life, basically. I've been at the United Community Center for over 21 years. And we noticed that there was a large gap between the ages being served in these three communities of Grayson, Wesley, and Vernalis. The first two agencies that were here only provided services for ages between 6 and 18 and 60 years plus. So in 2017, we decided that, yeah, there was a great need to form a foundation. And so the United Community Foundation was born. And at that same year, I had the great pleasure of meeting Julie Redner. She attended one of our Grayson Community Service District Board meetings. So since then, we've been involved in assisting with the restoration of the Grayson River Bend with River Partners. Before the restoration, please, the next slide. The Grayson Floodplain Project was separate from Dos Rios and the other floodplain projects in this area. So River Partners used the money from three separate state agencies, the Department of Water Resources, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the Wildlife Conservation Board, to restore 300 acres of floodplain forest right next to our town. Like I said before, it's in our own backyard. In February of 2022, a group of 40 residents, which included youth and adults, we all took part in planting native trees and shrubs. And since then, as you can see, we're reaping the benefits now. Next slide, please. It's after the restoration. It's been growing and storing carbon ever since. And when there was a high flow on the San Joaquin River in the winter and spring of 2023, the floodplain took the water that otherwise might have threatened the town. And when I think about it, it was a pretty scary time. But because of the work that River Partners did as far as opening one of the levees, the water was allowed to flow free out, and so our little hometown was saved. Um, there's another benefit that has resulted a great benefit, and I think it was just in time. I mean, after the pandemic, of course, there was a lot of damage done to our emotional health and wellness, and I think that Dos Rios has been definitely a blessing. We are now taking people out there on tours. The staff there at Dos Rios has been amazing. Um, for our seniors, for our young at heart, they've even developed La Lotería de la Naturaleza, which of course we all seniors enjoy bingo, and a lot of educational opportunities, about the wildlife, about the native plants, about just multiple benefits for, like I said again, our youth and our seniors. And one of the things also that happened, one of the great benefits was that because the flood recharged our groundwater aquifers. We were going through a historical drought here in California, and thanks to the overflow, our water was replenished. So I thank you, River Partners, those fields, and everybody for being part of this amazing endeavor to actually not just our little town of Grayson, like I said before, but throughout the world. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lilia. And I will ask you to stay on camera, and I'll ask the other panelists to come on camera for some Q&A. As that happens, Lilia, I just want to thank you really quickly for sharing the project in Grayson and all of the wonderful benefits that accrued from that, not just the flood benefits, but also the sense for the community and
Mhm.
emotional well-being.
Thank you.
Um, all right. Well, I guess the first question I will direct to you, Lilia. Oftentimes we see that small farming communities like in Grayson, are often ignored or invisible in Sacramento from policy conversations. So, how did you get decision makers to pay attention, and what does it take for a frontline community to have a seat at the table in these processes?
Well, first of all, I think the longevity as far as, being present and not giving up. I mean, you have to really make it a mission. You have to make it and awareness, bring awareness to everybody, because sometimes because we are so secluded, information doesn't get to us, easily or readily. And so knocking on doors and just having community meetings and um, like we try to do, take people out, to those rios and going on those nature walks, at the wildlife refuge, just creating opportunities basically, so then they can actually experience it. And it's amazing how it changes a person's mindset and how that really, I think that we all want to improve the quality of life while we're still here, right? For everybody and to enjoy nature and to really go back to basics.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's how Matt left his presentation as well, going back to basics. Um, so Matt, I'll throw it over to you for this next question. So we talked a lot about urban tree canopy and how
Mhm.
it's one of the most concrete equity tools that we have, but tree canopy in both the US and in California is deeply unequal. Wealthy neighborhoods have it and low-income neighborhoods have much less. So what does it actually take to close that gap?
Yeah, it was a real eye-opening experience when I started planting trees in Richmond and was in a competitive grant program. For starters, just everybody should know there's no such thing as competitive equity. Asking everybody to fight over the same grant dollars when somebody else has a head start feels really unfair. So when I was competing with the city of Berkeley for tree planting, even though there were set asides for disadvantaged communities, they had a full staff and a full team, and they also had sidewalks from the 80s and 90s. Whereas I was planting the sidewalks from the World War II era. If I was lucky, they were older than that and they were made out of redwood and I could plant straight in the dirt. But for the most part, black neighborhoods didn't really get the same treatment in the 30s and 40s, and that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody here. I had the same experience in Stockton, California, where I would plant trees next to stamps that said Works Project Administration 1934. And so they weren't exactly planning for urban canopy and global warming in 1934. So unfortunately, the calculus on which tree do you pick and where do you plant it also needed to take into account this whole gray infrastructure history that's embedded in the landscape, and that across the board, we've seen the United States disinvest from urban services, maintenance, cyclical maintenance of city assets. And we know whose neighborhood they disinvested from first. So there's There's an attenuation of who's received the least attention over the last 70 years. And the only way to address it is to invest in a commensurate fashion, to overinvest in places that you disinvested in long before, to go in with outsized money to address the gray infrastructure that's been left behind. And then our trees get a chance. And that can be done. It's a whole lot cheaper to do it now than it will be next year.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, it'll take consistent investment. It's not just about planting the tree, but also maintaining it. So appreciate that. Judith, over to you. Healthy soils practices are often framed as a climate and carbon benefit, but for a farmer, what do they actually do in terms of the bottom line? Do they save money? And if so, over what time horizon?
Well, thanks. And thanks to the other speakers. I learned a lot from your comments, and I love Lilia's and Matt's. I feel like a lot of these issues hit hardest sometimes in these unincorporated rural areas and disadvantaged communities. And I think what Lilia, for example, said is that we need to build these communities up because I think we're finding that the problems we're facing are actually problems for everyone. Wildfire turns out the smoke is a problem for everyone, and it affects all of us, even though some of us in these rural unincorporated areas are kind of first in line for some of it. But there's a long time horizon for the benefits of some of these practices. And a lot of the benefits of these practices are not for my farm or for a farm exactly. They're for others. The climate benefits, they don't come to us. The mitigation that we're doing, the fact that there's not fertilizers and nitrogen in the groundwater, the fact, that there's all these benefits that we can talk about that in the San Joaquin Valley, the dust having valley fever blowing around because of the way the land is managed. These are things that affect the community. And so I think that's why, even though we can talk a lot about the benefits on an individual farm, those are kind of long term. And for a lot of the new farmers that are coming up right now, they can't make those changes right away. And we need public support for them in order to see them adopt these these practices which benefit all of us.
Hmm. That's right. Farmers are incredible stewards of the land, and yet the profit margins are so thin that less and less farmers are able to maintain those farms. And in terms of the financial benefit or cost savings for the individual farmer, with this new war in Iran, we're seeing global oil prices go up, and with that also comes huge spikes in fertilizer prices as well. Do you have a sense of the cost between farms like yours that don't require fossil fueled inputs versus ones that do?
I can't give you that information directly, but I do know that the cost of fertilizer is hurting a lot of farmers, but that we don't purchase those kinds of fertilizers. But we do have, we pay a lot for our freight. We have diesel fuel that we use in a lot of our trucks. We've been turning over to solar power and to electrical vehicles as much as possible. But again, these things are large investments, and so we also on an organic farm we use a lot of labor. So I think it's a complicated question in terms of whether we're seeing a difference in our bottom line. And if you look at organic agriculture in California, the number of organic the number of organic acres and the number of organic farmers has declined significantly, is declining. And that's because of just the challenges that exist. And so certainly we can invest in these things, and certainly that the cost of our fertilizer may be lower, but we're replacing tractors with people a lot of times. We use much more labor. So I think it's a complicated question. And most important is for us to just understand that as a society, as a state, we need to move towards these solutions. We need to move towards solutions, and how can we do it? And I don't think it's not going to be about telling a farmer that they're going to save money because of these practices. It's about convincing the rest of our neighbors and friends and communities that these practices benefit all of us and that we need to invest to make it possible for farmers to adopt them.
Hmm. Right, right. Thank you, Judith. And Matt, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback real quick on Judith's comments. There's nothing easy about what Judith is doing. She does that for us. And as your neighbor, I want to say thank you, Judith. And I want to point out that, Judith is being subjected to so-called market rates and vicissitudes. That markets have never done anything important, right? We didn't let markets solve World War II. We shouldn't let markets solve global climate instability. And Judith would be really disappointed to learn that we happen to find special help for a certain class of people when they get involved in fuels. So in our county, in Stanislaus County, we set up nearly $50 million in subsidies for a sustainable aviation fuel plant, which is jet fuel just for rich people's private jets in the city of Riverbank to use animal fats, which sounds like a bit of circularity, right? Like we're going to use local agricultural excess. But no, because of markets, we're going to ship that animal fat from Indonesia and South Asia and Bangladesh because it's easier to push around farmers down there and get pig fat for less. So, ocean going vessels from South Asia to the port of Stockton, 30 of the dirtiest engines in the year would come in from there, and they would be trucked through our communities into Riverbank and boiled for rich people's private jets. We had $50 million for that. Judith, what could you do with $50 million?
I'll assume that's a rhetorical question.
Yeah, that's a great point that the devil's in the details. Definitely.
I'd love to invest that 50 million in more of the projects like Lilia described.
There
That's
we go. Exactly. All right, and I see a lot of other questions than Q&A, specific questions. Thank you, Judith. I know a lot of them have been directed towards you and you've answered them. And those are specific questions. We have a higher level question here from the audience. This is for you, Matt. Can you talk a bit more on the intersectionality of social and economic justice? How does this manifest? And I know as someone with rich history in the topic of history, I'm sure that you have a lot to say here.
Yeah. I tried to touch on that briefly in my presentation, which is, I'm sure everybody here worked real hard, and I want everybody to know that I think you deserve what you have. But also, wealth has nothing to do with how hard you worked. If you've ever met the rich, this is really clear to you. And so, wealth is resilience. Your ability to drive away from wildfire smoke or to escape a flood. I mean, Grayson, the poverty in Grayson and the vulnerability to the flooding there is a shame on the whole state of California. And the fact that they were able to complete this small project at Dos Rios is a monumental achievement. So what I would say about the intersection of social vulnerability is how I would characterize it is money matters. Cash rules everything around me. And if we're going to celebrate the fourth largest economy in the world, because I guess we pushed the Germans out of the way, which means something, or if we're going to brag about Judith working in the greatest wealth creating agricultural region in all of human history, right? That like includes the Ganges and the Nile. Then maybe we shouldn't have the most poverty impacted households in the country. Poverty is real. Poverty is a gross thing that for some reason we accept, and it's absolutely by design. As a historian, I can tell you we had other choices.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Well, we are slowly running out of time here now, but I want to ask a question to all of the panelists. Um, what is the single most important thing that the state legislature could do right now to accelerate nature-based solutions in California? And Lilia, I'd love to start it off with you.
Well, I think we all agree. I think we're all on the same page that we do need support, from the legislators. They need to, again, we go back to basics, the human nature, how all these extreme disasters are just killing us, killing the world, killing our lifestyle, killing our quality of life. When you have to worry about, oh my gosh, we had two fires along the river, and backyard. Um, the last one, the firefighters didn't have enough water to put it out. So they just let it burn. So they did do an amazing job of protecting the homes, but all this, it's all connected. It's happening, and our climate is going wacko. If I can't say a better word right now, but we do need to have some kind of sense of a safety. We need to have that safety net for things that we cannot control.
Right. We have to
Thank
prepare.
you.
Thank you, Lilia. Judith,
Thank
how
you.
about you?
Yeah. So one of the things that after the fires of 2020, the lightning fires that happened in our community in the Cape Bay Valley was that we were really only protected by volunteers. The same thing happened really during COVID. COVID was a real disaster for many communities, but many folks at the local level pulled together and delivered food, delivered support, could help to take care of each other. So I'm only mentioning this because I feel like a lot of it, I feel like on the one hand, government can be a solution, but on another hand, we have to help ourselves build our communities, build mutual support networks, and learn to talk and love each other. Talk with each other, love each other, and build these networks that we know will be there when these disasters hit. So, but government can help. Without government, we would still have smog in LA. We would still have burning rivers in Mississippi. We need government support if we're going to help deal with these disasters that we know are coming and that we've been experiencing. So I just think that bringing legislators to farms, showing them examples of Dos Rios, doing those kinds of things, and having webinars like this so that the public understands how important these issues are really will help. And I think this bill 2184 could be very beneficial in terms of bringing funding to these kinds of approaches during future years.
Thank you, Judith. And Matt, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to second that. We need to love each other, and I'm going to say something that you probably don't expect from me. We need to love the people who did this to us. Trust that no one has lost more than the people who have been robbed of their empathy. The people that act like this doesn't matter to them, that they don't care, that climate change is a hoax. Um, they've lost so much, and they know they're wrong, and they feel real bad when we point it out. And if you don't have a heart and you can't check in with your empathy, at least check in with like some practical science about, everybody being vulnerable if your neighbor's got COVID. Let's revisit that. Targeted universalism. If we help those that need the most help, it helps the most of us the most. So leaving people out doesn't do anybody good. There's no throwaway people. Everybody here has something to contribute. So sacred brain tissue doesn't happen anywhere else but on this planet. Let's conserve it all.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. I think that's really great commentary on the political climate writ large, not just the climate. Yeah. All right. Well, we are almost done here. I just wanted to thank everyone that joined us, both the attendees and, of course, the panelists as well. This has been an awesome conversation. And before we log off, my colleague Pamela will drop the link that you can follow to contact your state representative and urge them to support the bill that we've been talking about today, AB 2184, that will secure funding for these critical and totally awesome nature-based climate solutions. So yeah, thank you again, everyone, so much. We will be having another webinar next month, so please be on the lookout for that. And yeah, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
Bonnie.
you.
Bye,
Judith,
Lily. Bye,
Matt,
Judith. Bye,
thank you.
everybody.